Section 1. You're standing in your kitchen late at night, phone in hand, rereading a message that bothered you more than you want to admit, and you type back, "It's fine," even though your chest feels tight and your jaw is clenched. You set the phone down, but your mind keeps replaying it, like you just agreed to something you didn't actually agree to. You tell yourself it's not worth the tension, not worth the awkwardness, not worth making a thing out of it. Here's the uncomfortable question: what if saying it's fine when it's not is the real source of the tension you're trying to avoid? What if keeping the peace on the outside is quietly creating chaos on the inside? The pain shows up in small, familiar ways. At work, you take on extra tasks because it feels easier than pushing back, and then you resent the workload you agreed to. In relationships, you swallow comments that cross a line, and later you feel distant, irritated, or strangely numb. With money or time, you say yes out of guilt, obligation, or habit, and then you lie awake thinking about how stretched you feel. The stake is simple but heavy. Every time you minimize your own hurt, you teach yourself that your needs don't count, and over time that costs you energy, focus, sleep, and self-respect. It doesn't just drain you in the moment, it slowly reshapes how you see yourself. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to spot the exact moments where you abandon your own feelings without realizing it. You'll have simple, natural ways to express discomfort or disagreement without attacking, over-explaining, or shutting down. And you'll start treating your needs as valid information instead of something you have to hide to keep things smooth. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. If you want steady Stoic focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships every week, this is the channel for you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What we're going to do together is straightforward, but not easy. First, we're going to slow down and look closely at the habit of saying it's fine, and why it feels so automatic, even when it hurts you. Next, we'll untangle the fear underneath it, the quiet belief that honesty will lead to conflict, rejection, or being seen as difficult. Then, we'll work through practical ways to respond in real time, using short sentences that protect your boundaries without escalating the situation. After that, we'll practice holding the discomfort that comes with not smoothing things over right away, so you don't panic and backtrack. Finally, we'll put all of this into a real-life situation where the pressure is on, and you'll see how these tools actually change the outcome. As we go, pay attention to your own body. Notice when something in you nods along, or when you feel a subtle resistance. That's usually where the work is. This isn't about becoming cold, rigid, or confrontational. It's about becoming clear. Clarity is calm. Clarity is kind. And clarity doesn't require you to erase yourself. The reason this matters so much is that boundaries aren't just about other people. They're about your relationship with yourself. Every time you say it's fine when it's not, you're sending yourself a message. Your discomfort is inconvenient, your feelings are negotiable, your limits can wait. Over time, that message adds up. You might notice you're more irritable, more tired, and less patient than you used to be. You might wonder why small things set you off, or why you feel disconnected from people you care about. Often, it's not because you're too sensitive. It's because you've been ignoring your own signals for too long. Stoic philosophy has a lot to say about this, not in the modern language of boundaries, but in the idea that your inner state is your responsibility. As Marcus points out in Meditations, you don't control other people's behavior, but you do control your responses. That includes the response of honesty. When you choose clarity over appeasement, you're not trying to control anyone else. You're simply taking responsibility for your own inner life. You might be thinking, but if I stop saying it's fine, won't everything blow up? That fear makes sense. Many of us learned early on that keeping the peace meant staying quiet, being agreeable, or not making waves. And sometimes, that strategy worked in the short term. But the long-term cost is that your real feelings don't disappear, they just go underground. They come out later as sarcasm, withdrawal, overthinking, or sudden anger that seems to come out of nowhere. What we're aiming for instead is a middle path. Not dumping every feeling on everyone, and not swallowing everything either. You'll learn how to acknowledge discomfort without drama, how to buy yourself time instead of reacting on autopilot, and how to let other adults handle their reactions without you managing them. There's a moment later on where this really comes into focus. It's a Friday night situation, the kind where you're already tired, something small gets said, and the old you would either snap or shut down. When we get there, you'll see how one simple pause and one clear sentence can completely change the rest of the evening. Hold on to that image as we move forward, because it's not theoretical. It's the kind of moment that shows you, in your body, that a different way is possible. Section 2. You're going to change your boundaries faster by changing one tiny habit first. Stop answering in the same emotional moment you receive the request. The stake is real. If you keep responding instantly, you will keep handing your time, attention, and self-respect to whoever shows up with the strongest emotion or the most urgency. And then you'll wonder why you feel quietly angry, drained, and strangely far away from your own life. Most people think the boundary problem is about courage. It's partly that, but the bigger issue is timing. When someone asks you for something that you don't want to do, or they say something that stings, your body reacts before your mind forms a clean sentence. You feel a jolt of pressure, the urge to smooth it over, the fear of being seen as difficult, the worry that the mood will turn. So you reach for the fastest exit. It's fine. At that moment, it's fine isn't a statement of truth. It's a strategy to reduce tension. Your nervous system wants the room to feel calm again, and it will trade your needs to get that calm. That's why you can type "it's fine" with one hand while the other hand is literally tense, jaw tight, stomach heavy. Your body knows it's not fine, but your mouth is trying to keep the peace. The reason delaying your response works is simple. It separates the feeling from the decision. When you buy time, you give your mind a chance to come back online. You stop negotiating from a place of pressure. You stop agreeing to things just to escape the moment. In Stoic terms, you stop being dragged around by the first impression. Epictetus talks about impressions as the first hit of perception that tries to tell you what's happening and what you must do. The skill is not obeying that first hit. The skill is pausing long enough to choose your response. This is how a calmer, more focused version of you responds instead of reacting. You don't deny what you feel, and you don't let it drive the car. Here's the microscript that makes this practical, and it's designed to be boring on purpose. I'm not sure yet. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Say it exactly like that. It sounds ordinary because it is ordinary. The power is that it gives you space without starting a fight. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't explain. It doesn't invite debate. It simply creates a pause where your real answer can form. Now put this into a scene you've lived. It's a weekday afternoon, you're in the middle of work, and your phone lights up with a message from a friend or family member. Can you come through tonight? I really need you. The old pattern happens fast. Your stomach drops, you feel guilty for even hesitating, and you type, "It's fine, I'll come," while already resenting the fact that your evening just got taken. Then later you're tired, you're irritated, and you show up with half a heart, which helps no one and quietly teaches you that your time is available to whoever needs it most loudly. Try the new response. You read the message, you notice the pressure, you take one slow breath, and you type, "I'm not sure yet. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you." The other person might reply with "okay" or "seriously," and that's where your growth begins, because you let them have their reaction without you managing it. 10 minutes later, when your body is calmer, you look at your night honestly. Maybe you can help for 30 minutes but not the whole evening. Maybe you can help tomorrow instead. Maybe you can't help this time period. Whatever the answer is, it's now your answer, not an emotional reflex you paid for with later resentment. Notice what changed in that scene. You didn't become harsh. You didn't lecture anyone about boundaries. You didn't turn it into a big conversation about respect. You simply refused to make a decision while your nervous system was trying to purchase immediate peace. And that alone is a boundary. It's a boundary with time. A lot of people struggle here because they confuse a pause with rejection. They think, if I don't answer now, I'm being cold. Or, if I don't soothe them immediately, I'm selfish. But a pause isn't cruelty. A pause is accuracy. A pause is you refusing to lie with your mouth to avoid a feeling in your body. And when you stop lying in small ways, you stop building hidden resentment. That resentment is what eventually explodes into tone, sarcasm, withdrawal, or sudden anger that surprises everyone, including you. The pause prevents the explosion later by letting you be honest earlier, in a calm way. There's also another layer. People get trained by your speed. If you always answer instantly, people learn that urgency works on you. They learn they can get a yes by making it awkward for you to say no. They don't even have to be manipulative for this to happen. It's just learning. And you've trained yourself too. You've trained your brain to associate discomfort with immediate fixing. So when you practice the pause, you're retraining both sides. You're teaching other people, I don't make decisions under pressure, and you're teaching yourself, I can survive a few seconds of discomfort without selling myself out. Your tiny action for today is specific. Create a personal rule for the next 24 hours that you do not give an immediate yes to any request that costs you time, energy, or emotional labor. Not at work, not with family, not with friends, not with your partner. If it affects your schedule, your money, your peace, or your body, you pause. You can still be kind. You can still be warm. But you do not answer on the first wave. Even if the request seems small. Especially if the request seems small, because that's where the habit hides. And if you want this to be measurable, make it concrete. Choose one communication lane where you tend to cave, Slack, text, or email, and set a simple reply window for the rest of today. Something like, you only respond to non-urgent messages at the top of the hour, or you give yourself at least 10 minutes before you answer anything emotionally loaded. This isn't about being unavailable. It's about being deliberate. Now let's do a slow practice moment so your body learns this, not just your mind. Think of one recent situation where you said it's fine but it wasn't. Don't pick the biggest one. Pick a medium one, something real but not overwhelming. Notice where you feel it in your body as you remember it, maybe a tight throat, a heavy chest, a warm face, a little anger in your stomach. Now take 3 slow breaths. In, hold, and out. In, hold, and out. In, hold, and out. And as you exhale the 3rd time, say the microscript out loud, quietly, like you're practicing for real, I'm not sure yet. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Say it again, slower, as if you're sending it to someone you care about. One more time, and this time let your shoulders drop as you say it, like you're giving yourself permission to be a person with limits. If you feel a little guilt coming up, that's normal. Guilt often appears when you stop doing the old job you were trained to do, the job of keeping everyone comfortable at your expense. Let the guilt be there without obeying it. The Stoic move is not to eliminate the feeling. It's to refuse to let the feeling command your behavior. Keep this one line close. Later, when we get to that Friday night moment that was teased earlier, the pressure won't be a casual request. It'll feel personal, and it'll tempt you to either swallow it or snap. This pause is how you stay steady long enough to choose clarity instead of automatically saying it's fine. Section 3. Another shift happens when you stop explaining your boundaries as if they are on trial. The claim here is simple. The more you over-explain your discomfort, the less seriously it gets taken, including by you. The stake is that if you keep justifying every boundary with long stories and emotional labor, you teach people that your limits are negotiable, and you teach yourself that you need permission to have them at all. Over-explaining usually doesn't come from confidence, it comes from fear. You're afraid that a short, clear boundary will make you look rude, uncaring, or unreasonable. So you pad it. You add context, backstory, apologies, and emotional cushioning. You try to make the other person comfortable with your discomfort. But what actually happens is that the message gets diluted. Instead of hearing a boundary, the other person hears uncertainty. They hear room to push back, to debate, to solve your feelings for you. And then you're right back where you started, negotiating something that should have been simple. Why this works the way it does is rooted in how people respond to clarity. When you're clear, even if someone doesn't like your answer, they usually understand it. When you're vague, apologetic, or overly detailed, you invite interpretation. You create openings. Your nervous system thinks it's protecting you by softening the blow, but what it's really doing is keeping you stuck in the conversation longer than necessary. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't confuse kindness with self-erasure. That version understands that clarity is respectful, even when it's uncomfortable. Here's the microscript that changes this pattern, and again, it's intentionally plain: that doesn't work for me. That's the whole sentence. No right now. No because. No apology attached. Let's see how this plays out in a common North American relationship moment. You're texting with someone you're dating, and they suggest plans that don't sit right with you. Maybe it's last minute again. Maybe it crosses a line you've already mentioned. The old response looks like this: you feel uneasy, but you don't want to seem difficult, so you type a paragraph. You explain how your week has been busy, how you're tired, how you wish things were planned earlier, how you don't want to disappoint them. By the end, you've talked yourself into going, or they've talked you into a compromise that still doesn't feel good. Try the new response. You read the message, feel the familiar pull to justify yourself, and instead you send, "That doesn't work for me." They might reply, "Why not?" or "What do you mean?" and that's where the practice deepens. You don't owe a full autobiography. You can repeat the boundary or offer a simple alternative, but you don't reopen the question of whether your discomfort is valid. Notice what happens internally when you use that sentence. There's often a spike of anxiety right after you send it. Your body is waiting for fallout. This is where most people panic and start typing explanations to soothe themselves. But if you pause, something important happens. You realize the world doesn't end. The other person might be annoyed, confused, or disappointed, and all of that is survivable. What you've done is step out of the role of emotional manager. You've let another adult have their reaction without you scrambling to fix it. This is especially powerful at work. Imagine a meeting where a deadline gets moved up without discussion, and everyone goes quiet. You feel it immediately. The pressure, the frustration, the sense that this isn't realistic. The old you might nod along and later complain to yourself or others. Or you might speak up but wrap it in so much explanation that it loses its force. The new response sounds like this: "That timeline doesn't work for me." Calm tone. Neutral face. You might follow it with a concrete alternative if appropriate, but you don't start by apologizing for existing. You state your reality and let the conversation adjust around it. The tiny action here is specific and slightly uncomfortable. Today or tomorrow, choose one moment where you would normally over-explain, and deliberately don't. Use one sentence instead of 5. If you catch yourself typing a paragraph, delete it and replace it with a single clear line. You're not being cold, you're being precise. To support this, let's slow it down for a moment. Right now, take a breath and bring to mind someone whose reactions you tend to manage. Maybe you feel responsible for their mood, their stress, their disappointment. Notice how your body reacts just thinking about setting a boundary with them. Then quietly say, "I don't need to explain myself to be valid." Say it again, slower. Let the words land in your chest, not just your head. There's an identity shift happening here. When you stop over-explaining, you're not becoming less kind. You're becoming more honest. You're signaling to yourself that your internal signals matter. And interestingly, people often start respecting your boundaries more when you respect them yourself. Not because you're forceful, but because you're consistent. A common worry is, what if they think I'm selfish? Sometimes they might. That's not a failure. That's information. It tells you something about the dynamic. Stoic philosophy reminds us that other people's judgments are outside our control. What is in your control is whether you act in line with your values. If clarity and self-respect are values you're choosing, then occasional misunderstanding is part of the cost. And that cost is usually far lower than the ongoing price of resentment and self-silencing. Pay attention over the next few days to how often you feel the urge to justify yourself. That urge is a signal, not a command. Each time you resist it, you strengthen the muscle of self-trust. And this matters because later, when emotions are higher and the stakes feel more personal, you won't have time to craft perfect explanations. You'll need simple, solid sentences that hold under pressure. Keep this one close. That doesn't work for me. When we move forward, we'll build on this clarity and add another layer, one that helps you stay grounded when the other person pushes back or tries to pull you into defending yourself. That's where this really gets tested, and that's where it starts to feel like real freedom instead of just a technique. Section 4. There's another layer that quietly breaks boundaries even when you pause and even when you're clear. You confuse discomfort with danger. The claim here is that most boundary failures don't happen because you don't know what to say, they happen because your body panics when someone reacts badly. The stake is that if you treat emotional discomfort as something you must immediately fix, you'll undo your own boundary the moment it gets tested. This shows up right after you do the right thing. You pause. You say the clear sentence. And then the other person sighs, goes quiet, sends a short reply, looks annoyed, or says, "Wow, okay." Your chest tightens. Your brain starts racing. You think, "I messed this up," or "I'm being mean," or "I need to smooth this over." And before you even realize what's happening, you start backtracking. You add explanations. You soften the boundary. You offer more than you meant to. The boundary collapses not because it was wrong, but because you couldn't tolerate the emotional aftershock. This happens because your nervous system is wired to avoid social threats. For most of human history, being rejected by the group was dangerous. So when someone's tone changes or their mood drops, your body reacts as if something serious is happening. It floods you with urgency. Fix it now. Restore harmony. Don't let this linger. The problem is that modern emotional discomfort is rarely an actual danger. It's just a sensation. It's awkwardness, disappointment, or tension passing through the room. A calmer, more focused version of you understands this difference. That version can feel the discomfort without immediately obeying it. The skill here is learning to stay put when the other person is uncomfortable. Not cruelly. Not smugly. Just steadily. And that requires a sentence you can use internally, one that keeps you from scrambling. Here's the microscript, and this one is for you, not for them. I can let this be uncomfortable. Say it exactly like that. Let's put this into a familiar North American scenario. You're at work, maybe on a Zoom call or in a meeting room, and you say, "That deadline doesn't work for me." There's a pause. Someone raises an eyebrow. The manager says, "Well, we all have to make sacrifices." The old pattern kicks in immediately. Your face gets warm. You feel exposed. You rush to explain how hard you're working, how you didn't mean it that way, how you'll try to make it work somehow. You leave the meeting feeling small and resentful. Now try the new approach. You say the same sentence. When the reaction comes, you notice the urge to fix it. You feel the discomfort in your body. And instead of filling the silence, you internally repeat, "I can let this be uncomfortable." You stay quiet for a beat. Then, if needed, you calmly restate your boundary or propose a realistic alternative. You don't rush to rescue the mood. The conversation shifts. Maybe not perfectly, but it shifts. And you walk away intact. This is where many people get tripped up, because they think boundaries are about controlling outcomes. They're not. Boundaries are about controlling your behavior. You don't get to decide how other people feel about your limits. You only get to decide whether you abandon yourself when those feelings show up. When you stay present through discomfort, you're teaching your body a new lesson: I can survive this. I don't have to fix it to be okay. This matters even more in close relationships. Imagine you tell a partner or close friend that something they did hurt you. You're careful. You're calm. You're honest. And they get defensive. Maybe they shut down. Maybe they say, "I guess I'm just a terrible person then." That moment is electric with pressure. The old you would immediately reassure them, downplay your feelings, and say, "No, it's fine, forget I said anything." That's the reflex to escape discomfort. Try staying instead. You notice your heart rate rise. You breathe. You let them have their reaction without correcting it. You might say, "I'm not attacking you. I'm just sharing how it landed for me." Or you might say nothing at all and let the silence do some work. This is not punishment. This is restraint. The tiny action for today is to practice staying silent for 5 extra seconds when someone reacts negatively to a boundary. Literally count in your head if you need to. 5 seconds where you don't explain, apologize, or change your position. That's it. 5 seconds is enough to break the reflex and let your nervous system settle. Let's slow this down right now so your body understands it. Think of a recent time when you set a limit and then immediately felt guilty or anxious. Bring that moment to mind. Notice where the discomfort shows up physically. Don't judge it. Just notice. Now take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, say quietly, "I can let this be uncomfortable." Again. And one more time. As you say it, imagine yourself staying present instead of rushing to fix. Feel the ground under your feet. Feel the chair supporting you. You're not in danger. You're just feeling something. There's an important distinction here between kindness and caretaking. Kindness respects reality. Caretaking tries to erase it. When you rush to make someone feel better about your boundary, you're not actually being kind to either of you. You're avoiding your own discomfort, and you're denying them the chance to process theirs. Adults are allowed to feel disappointed. They're allowed to be frustrated. They're allowed to need time. When you allow that, relationships become more honest, not less. Stoic thinkers return to this idea again and again in different languages. You're responsible for your judgments and your actions, not for managing every emotional ripple around you. When you internalize that, you stop treating every sigh or pause as a crisis. You start seeing it as weather. It passes. Pay attention over the next week to the exact moment when you feel tempted to undo a boundary. That moment is gold. It's the training ground. Each time you stay instead of scrambling, you build trust with yourself. And that trust becomes the foundation for stronger, calmer boundaries that don't require force or drama. This skill connects directly to what's coming next. Because staying with discomfort is one thing when the reaction is mild. It's another thing when someone pushes, argues, or tries to pull you into a debate. In the next stretch, we'll look at how to respond when your boundary is challenged directly without getting pulled into defending or attacking. That's where these pieces start locking together under real pressure. Section 5. Another common way boundaries collapse is when you get pulled into defending them. The claim here is that you don't need to convince anyone that your boundary is reasonable for it to be valid. The problem is that if you keep arguing for your limits, you'll stay stuck in exhausting conversations where your needs become a debate, and the loudest or most persistent person usually wins. Defending feels logical at the moment. Someone pushes back, questions you, or challenges your boundary, and your brain goes into lawyer mode. You start gathering evidence. You explain your schedule, your stress level, and your intentions. You try to prove that you're not selfish, lazy, or uncaring. What you're really doing is trying to secure their approval so you can feel safe holding your line. But every explanation invites a counterargument. Every justification creates another opening. Before long, the conversation isn't about your boundary anymore. It's about whose reasons are better. And that's a fight you never needed to enter. This works the way it does because most people are uncomfortable with unresolved tension. When someone disagrees with you or pushes back, your nervous system reads that as instability. Defending feels like a way to restore balance. If they understand you, maybe they'll stop pushing. Sometimes that happens. Often it doesn't. A calmer, more focused version of you understands a hard truth. Understanding and agreement are not the same thing. Someone can fully understand your boundary and still not like it. And that's okay. Here's the microscript that keeps you out of the courtroom: I hear you, and my answer is still no. Or, if it doesn't feel too strong in that context, I hear you, and I'm still not able to do that. It acknowledges the other person without reopening the decision. Let's put this into a familiar North American family scenario. A relative asks you to contribute time or money to something that you genuinely can't or don't want to do. You say no. They respond with disappointment, guilt, or pressure. But everyone else is helping. It's really important. I thought you cared. The old pattern kicks in. You start explaining your budget, your workload, your exhaustion. You feel defensive. You feel misunderstood. The conversation drags on, and you either cave or walk away feeling awful. Try the new response. You listen. You let them finish. You say, I hear you, and I'm still not able to help with that. They might push again. You repeat the sentence, calmly. No new information. No escalation. Eventually, the pressure loses its fuel. Not because you won, but because you didn't play. This skill is especially important at work. Imagine a manager challenges your boundary by saying, this shouldn't be that hard, or we all have to go the extra mile sometimes. Those statements are designed, consciously or not, to pull you into self-defense. The old you would over-explain or feel ashamed. The new response sounds like, I understand the urgency, and I still can't meet that timeline. Neutral tone. Steady presence. You're not arguing with their perspective. You're stating your capacity. And you're doing it without turning yourself inside out. The tiny action for today is to pick one boundary you've already set, or need to set soon, and decide in advance that you will not add new explanations after the first statement. If the person pushes, you repeat your boundary in slightly different words, but you don't introduce new reasons. Think of it like a broken record, but a calm one. Consistent, not combative. Let's slow this down with a short practice so your body doesn't panic when you don't defend yourself. Bring to mind someone who tends to argue with your limits. Notice how your body reacts just thinking about holding your ground with them. Now take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, say quietly, I don't need to convince you. Again, slower. And one more time. Feel how that lands. There might be fear there. That's okay. You're not trying to erase the fear. You're teaching yourself that fear doesn't get to decide your behavior. There's an important distinction here between being responsive and being persuadable. Responsive means you listen, you consider, you acknowledge. Persuadable means your boundary disappears as soon as someone applies pressure. When you stop defending, you're still responsive. You're just no longer persuadable in ways that harm you. A lot of people worry that this will make them seem rigid or uncaring. In practice, the opposite often happens. When you stop arguing, the emotional temperature drops. There's less back and forth, less escalation. And even if the other person remains unhappy, the interaction ends sooner and cleaner. You're not carrying it around all day, replaying what you should have said. You said what you needed to say. Stoic thinking supports this in a quiet way. You're responsible for your choices, not for persuading others to like them. When you accept that, you stop trying to control what's outside your control. You focus on acting in line with your values, and you let the rest be what it is. Watch for the moment when you feel the urge to add just one more explanation. That's the reflex you're retraining. Each time you resist it, you reinforce the boundary internally. You show yourself that your first answer was enough. This skill becomes even more powerful when emotions are running high, because pressure increases the urge to justify. In the next part, we'll look at what to do when the pushback turns emotional, when someone's disappointment, anger, or sadness makes you feel responsible for fixing how they feel. That's where boundaries often get emotionally expensive, and that's where this work really pays off. Section 6. Another place boundaries quietly erode is when you take responsibility for other people's emotions. The claim here is direct. You are not required to fix how someone feels in order to be a good, kind, or caring person. The problem is that if you keep treating other adults' emotions as your job, your boundaries will always come second to whoever feels the most upset, disappointed, or fragile in the moment. This pattern often looks generous on the surface. You notice someone is hurt, stressed, or frustrated, and something in you immediately leans forward. You soften your voice. You adjust your words. You compromise your needs. You think, if I can just help them feel better, everything will be okay. But over time, this turns into emotional overwork. You start managing moods instead of sharing reality. And the cost is quiet but real. You feel responsible for outcomes you don't control, and you feel guilty whenever someone doesn't feel good around you. The reason this happens is simple. Many of us learned early that being loved meant being soothing. We learned that tension was dangerous, that sadness needed to be fixed quickly, that anger meant we'd done something wrong. So when someone reacts emotionally to your boundary, your body treats it like an emergency. Fix it. Reassure them. Take it back. That urgency isn't wisdom. It's conditioning. A calmer, more focused version of you can tell the difference between empathy and responsibility. Empathy means you can care about how someone feels. Responsibility means you believe it's your job to change it. Those are not the same thing. Here's the microscript that helps separate them, and it's one you can use out loud or silently. I can care without taking this on. Say it exactly like that. Let's put this into a familiar North American relationship moment. You tell a friend you can't show up the way they want right now. Maybe you can't talk for hours, or you can't help with something big. They get quiet. Or they sound hurt. Or they say, I guess I'll just deal with it myself. The old pattern kicks in immediately. Your chest tightens. You feel like a bad friend. You start offering more than you have. No, I didn't mean it like that. I can try. I'll make it work. And suddenly, your boundary is gone. Try the new response. You notice their emotion. You let it exist. You say, I hear that you're disappointed. And then you stop. You don't fix it. You don't add, so I'll do it anyway. You let the feeling be theirs. That's not cruelty. That's adulthood. This matters deeply because emotions are not problems to be solved. They're experiences to be felt. When you rush to make someone feel better, you're often interrupting their natural process. You're also sending an unspoken message: your discomfort is unbearable to me, so I need to eliminate it. Over time, that can actually weaken relationships. It teaches people to outsource their emotional regulation to you. And it teaches you that your worth is tied to keeping others comfortable. This pattern shows up constantly at work too. A coworker is stressed. A manager is under pressure. A client is unhappy. You feel it in the room. You absorb it. You start adjusting your boundaries to ease their stress. You take on more work. You stay late. You say yes when you should say no. The unspoken belief is, if they're stressed, I need to fix it. But that belief quietly burns you out. The healthier move sounds like this: you acknowledge the pressure, but you don't sacrifice your capacity. I see this as stressful, paired with, and this is still what I can do. Both can exist at the same time. The tiny action for today is to practice naming emotions without solving them. Just once. When someone reacts emotionally to a boundary, reflect the feeling in one short sentence and then stop. I can see this is frustrating. It sounds like you're disappointed. I get that this is stressful. No solution attached. No promise. No rescue. Let that be enough. Now let's slow this down so your body doesn't panic when you don't jump in. Think of someone whose emotions you tend to manage. Notice how quickly you feel responsible for how they feel. Now take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, say quietly, their feelings are real, and they are not mine to fix. Say it again, slower. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. This is not abandonment. This is respect. There's often a fear underneath this practice: if I don't fix it, I'll lose the relationship. That fear deserves honesty. Some relationships are built on emotional caretaking. When you stop doing that job, the relationship changes. Sometimes it deepens because there's more honesty and less resentment. Sometimes it fades because it was held together by you overfunctioning. That's painful, but it's also information. Stoic thinking reminds us that we can't control who stays when we start living more truthfully. We can only control whether we betray ourselves to keep them. Another subtle point here is that people often grow when you stop rescuing them. When you allow someone to feel disappointed, they learn they can survive disappointment. When you allow them to feel stressed, they learn to manage stress. When you stop absorbing emotions for them, you give them back their own strength. That's not selfish. That's mature. Watch for the moment when someone's emotion triggers guilt in you. That's the signal. Guilt often appears when you stop doing a role you were trained to do. Instead of obeying it, get curious. Ask yourself, am I actually doing something wrong right now, or am I just uncomfortable? Those are very different things. As you practice this, you may notice an internal shift. You feel lighter. Conversations end sooner. You're less drained afterward. You're not replaying interactions all night, wondering if you should have said something differently. That's the payoff. You're no longer carrying emotional weight that doesn't belong to you. This skill connects directly to what comes next. Because once you stop fixing other people's feelings, there will be moments when silence stretches, when disappointment hangs in the air, when nothing gets resolved right away. In the next part, we'll focus on how to hold your boundaries over time, not just in the moment, especially when the discomfort doesn't disappear quickly. That's where consistency replaces people-pleasing, and where boundaries become something you live, not just something you say. Section 7. Another place boundaries quietly fall apart is not in the moment you set them, but in the days that follow. The claim here is that inconsistency, not cruelty, is what confuses people and exhausts you. The problem is that if you set a boundary once and then slowly erode it through exceptions, follow-ups, or guilt-driven reversals, you train others to wait you out, and you train yourself not to trust your own word. This usually doesn't look dramatic. It looks reasonable. You set a boundary, and then a day later you think, well, just this once. Or you feel bad and send a message softening what you said. Or you notice the other person is still distant, and you reach out to smooth things over by offering more than you intended. None of these moments feel like a big betrayal. But taken together, they undo the boundary entirely. What people learn is not what you say. It's what you consistently do. The reason consistency is hard is because time reactivates doubt. In the moment, you might feel clear. You've thought it through. You've said the sentence. But later, when emotions settle and guilt creeps in, your mind starts rewriting the story. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I didn't consider their side enough. Maybe it wasn't that big a deal. This isn't always growth. Often, it's anxiety trying to regain control by reopening the decision. A calmer, more focused version of you understands that clarity fades under emotional pressure, so consistency has to be deliberate, not reactive. Here's the microscript that protects you after the fact: I already decided this. That's a sentence you say to yourself. Not aggressively. Not defensively. Just firmly. Let's put this into a familiar North American scenario. You tell a coworker you can't take on an extra responsibility this month. They accept it, but they're a little distant afterward. The next day, you notice their tone is short. You start feeling uneasy. The old pattern shows up. You think, I should probably reach out and explain more, or I could just help a little so things aren't awkward. Before you know it, you're back in the situation you tried to avoid. Try the new response internally. When the urge to reopen the boundary shows up, you pause and say to yourself, I already decided this. You let the awkwardness exist. You keep acting in line with your original choice. A few days later, the tension usually fades. And if it doesn't, that tells you something important about the dynamic. This is just as relevant in close relationships. Imagine you tell a friend or partner you need more notice before making plans. They agree, but the next time they still ask at the last minute. You hesitate. You don't want to seem rigid. You think it's not worth making a big deal again. So you go along with it. What just happened isn't flexible. It's mixed messaging. You taught them that the boundary was optional. Consistency would look like kindly repeating the boundary, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you feel like a broken record. Not with anger. With steadiness. Consistency works because it reduces confusion. When people know what to expect from you, they adapt. When they don't, they test. This isn't malicious most of the time. It's human. We all probe the edges of what's allowed. When your boundaries change depending on your guilt level, your energy level, or how someone reacts, you stay stuck in constant negotiation. When your boundaries are consistent, life actually gets simpler. The tiny action here is to pick one boundary you've already set and commit to honoring it for a full week without exceptions. Just one. Notice how often the urge to bend it shows up. Don't judge that urge. Just notice it and return to the decision. If you need a concrete anchor, write the boundary down somewhere private so you can remind yourself that it wasn't impulsive. It was chosen. Now let's slow this down so your body doesn't confuse consistency with danger. Bring to mind a boundary you tend to soften later. Notice what you feel when you imagine holding it steady for a week. Maybe anxiety. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear of conflict. Take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, say quietly, consistency is not cruelty. Again, slower. And one more time. Let your body feel what it's like to stay grounded instead of reactive. There's a common misunderstanding here that consistency makes you rigid. In reality, consistency creates safety. People know where they stand. You know where you stand. Flexibility still exists, but it's conscious, not guilt-driven. You can choose to make exceptions when you genuinely want to, not when you're trying to manage someone else's reaction. Stoic philosophy points to this idea in its emphasis on integrity. Acting in alignment with your values isn't about being perfect. It's about being coherent. When your actions line up over time, your inner world settles. You're not constantly second-guessing yourself. You're not replaying conversations at night. You're not wondering why you feel drained by interactions that shouldn't be a big deal. Watch for the moment when you're tempted to reopen a closed decision just to relieve tension. That's the test. That's where consistency gets built. Each time you hold the line gently, you reinforce trust with yourself. And self-trust is what makes boundaries feel natural instead of forced. This matters because in real life, boundaries aren't one-time statements. They're patterns. And patterns only work when they repeat. In the next part, we'll look at what happens when multiple pressures hit at once, when timing, emotion, and expectation collide, and how to keep your boundaries intact without becoming defensive or withdrawn. That's where all of this comes together under real-world complexity. Section 8. There's one more pressure point where boundaries tend to fail, and it's when multiple demands hit at the same time. The claim here is that boundaries don't usually break because of one big request, they break because of accumulation. The problem is that if you don't consciously protect your capacity when life stacks pressures on top of each other, you'll default back to it's fine, not because you want to, but because you're depleted. This is the moment where everything feels urgent at once. Work is busy. Someone close to you needs something. A bill is due. Your phone keeps lighting up. None of the requests are outrageous on their own, but together they overwhelm your system. When capacity drops, clarity drops with it. You stop responding intentionally and start reacting mechanically. You say yes because thinking feels like too much effort. Later, when you finally slow down, resentment shows up and you wonder how you ended up here again. This happens because boundaries require energy. Not force, but energy. When you're tired, stressed, or emotionally overloaded, your brain reaches for the easiest option. And the easiest option is the one you've practiced the most. For many people, that's appeasing, explaining, rescuing, or minimizing themselves. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't wait until capacity is gone to protect it. That version treats energy as something to guard proactively, not something to recover after damage is done. The skill in this section is learning to recognize when you're at or near capacity and to respond differently before you cross the line. Here's the microscript that helps you do that in real time. I don't have the bandwidth for this right now. That sentence can be said out loud or quietly to yourself. It's not dramatic. It's descriptive. And it's honest. Let's put this into a familiar North American mix of pressures. It's midweek. Work has been intense. You're behind on sleep. You're scrolling your phone in the evening, trying to decompress, when a text comes in from someone who often leans on you emotionally. They want to talk. At the same time, an email notification pops up about something due tomorrow. Your body tightens. The old pattern would be to answer the text immediately, offer support, and push your own needs further down the list, even though you're already stretched thin. Try the new response. You pause. You notice how full you already feel. You reply, I don't have the bandwidth to talk tonight, but I can check in tomorrow. That's it. You don't justify it with a rundown of your stress. You don't apologize for being human. You protect the little bit of space you have left. This matters because capacity isn't just about time. It's about emotional and mental load. You can technically have an hour free and still have no bandwidth. When you ignore that, you borrow against yourself. You spend energy you don't have, and the interest shows up later as irritability, shutdown, or snapping at someone who doesn't deserve it. This shows up at work constantly. Imagine you're already overloaded and someone asks, can you just add one more thing? The phrase just one more thing is often the tipping point. The old you might say yes automatically, thinking you'll figure it out later. The new response sounds like, I'm at capacity right now. If something changes, I'll let you know. You're not saying never. You're saying not from an empty place. That honesty prevents mistakes, burnout, and quiet resentment. The tiny action here is practical. Once today, do a quick internal capacity check before you respond to a request. Ask yourself, do I actually have the bandwidth for this? If the answer is no, practice saying so, even if it feels awkward. Especially if it feels awkward. That awkwardness is the boundary forming. Now let's slow this down so it becomes embodied, not just intellectual. Right now, pause and notice how you feel in your body. Are you tired? Alert? Heavy? Scattered? Take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, say quietly, I'm allowed to protect my capacity. Again, slower. Let that sentence land. Capacity is not a moral issue. It's a reality. There's often guilt attached to this practice. You might think, other people handle more than this, or I should be able to manage. But capacity is not a competition. It changes day to day. Stoic philosophy points to this indirectly in its emphasis on acting according to nature. Your nature includes limits. Ignoring them doesn't make you strong. It makes you brittle. Another subtle trap here is waiting for permission. You might think, once things calm down, then I'll set boundaries. But things rarely calm down on their own. Life fills the space you leave unprotected. The boundary has to come first. You don't wait until you're empty to say no. You say no so you don't become empty. Watch how this changes your inner experience. When you respect your capacity, you show up more fully when you do say yes. Your yes become cleaner. You're less distracted. You're more present. That's better for everyone involved. Boundaries aren't about withholding. They're about choosing where your energy actually goes. There's also a long-term effect. When people see that you're consistent about capacity, they start approaching you differently. They ask with more respect. They plan better. Or they adjust their expectations. Not always immediately, but over time. And even if they don't, you're no longer burning yourself out to meet demands that exceed what you can give. Notice the difference between this and earlier sections. Before, you learned how to pause, how to be clear, how to tolerate discomfort, how not to defend, how not to fix emotions, and how to stay consistent. This layer adds realism. It acknowledges that you're not operating in a vacuum. You're operating in a busy, demanding world. Protecting your bandwidth is what allows all the other skills to keep working when life gets loud. Pay attention this week to the first signs that you're nearing capacity. That's the moment to act. Not when you're already overwhelmed. When you catch it early and respond honestly, boundaries stop feeling like emergencies. They start feeling like maintenance. And this sets us up for the next part, where everything we've talked about gets tested at once. A real situation. Real pressure. Real emotion. In that moment, it won't be about remembering every concept. It will be about recognizing capacity, pausing, choosing one clear sentence, and staying with the discomfort long enough for the moment to pass. That's where boundaries stop being theory and start becoming lived experience. Section 9. It's Friday night, and you're finally home after a long week. The house is quiet. You've changed into something comfortable. There's food heating up in the kitchen, and for the first time all day, your shoulders start to drop. This is the moment you were looking forward to, the small pocket of rest that helps you reset. Then your phone buzzes. It's a text from someone close to you. The message isn't explosive, but it's loaded. They're upset. Something you said earlier in the week didn't land well, and now they want to talk about it. Right now. Your chest tightens immediately. This is the exact kind of moment where the old pattern used to take over. You'd tell yourself it's easier to deal with it now. You'd say it's fine, even though it isn't. You'd put your evening on hold, manage their emotions, and go to bed drained and resentful. You notice that urge rises up. The reflex is familiar. Fix it. Smooth it out. Don't let this linger. For a split second, your fingers hover over the keyboard, ready to type something agreeable just to make the tension go away. Then you remember the pause. You don't answer right away. You put the phone down and take one slow breath. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You feel how tired you actually are. You do a quick internal check and realize you're at capacity. Not just busy, but emotionally full. This isn't a good moment to have a charged conversation, and you know it. Quietly, you repeat the sentence you practiced earlier, I don't have the bandwidth for this right now. You pick the phone back up and type a short reply. I hear that you're upset. I don't have the bandwidth to talk tonight, but I can check in tomorrow. You read it once. You resist the urge to add an explanation. You hit send. Almost immediately, another message comes back. It's short. Wow. Okay. That familiar spike of discomfort hits your chest. This is the moment where you used to cave. Where guilt would flood in and you'd rush to reassure them, take it back, or offer more than you meant to. You feel the pull to fix it. You feel the fear of being seen as uncaring. Instead of reacting, you sit with it. You let the discomfort be there. You put your feet flat on the floor and notice the weight of your body in the chair. You take another slow breath and say to yourself, I can let this be uncomfortable. You don't send another message. You don't defend your choice. You don't explain you're weak. You let the silence stretch. A few minutes pass. The world doesn't end. Your food is ready. You eat. You stay present. There's still a slight tension in the background, but it's not running in the evening anymore. You're not replaying sentences in your head. You're not negotiating with yourself. You already decided. The next morning, you wake up with more clarity than you would have had the night before. Your body feels calmer. When you check your phone, there's another message. It's less sharp. Can we talk later today? You take a breath before answering. You're not rushed. You respond, yes, later today works. When you do talk, the tone is different. You're steadier. You listen without taking responsibility for fixing how they feel. When they explain why they were hurt, you don't rush to erase it. You say, I get why that landed badly for you. And when there's a moment where they push for more than you can give, you stay clear. That still doesn't work for me. You don't argue. You don't over-explain. You let that be the end of the sentence. There's a moment where the old reaction almost comes back. They sound disappointed. You feel the familiar urge to soften the boundary just to restore harmony. You notice it. You pause. You remember that consistency is not cruelty. You hold the line. The conversation doesn't turn magical. They don't instantly thank you for your boundaries. But something important happens. The tension doesn't spiral. It doesn't turn into a long, draining back and forth. It ends. And when it does, you don't feel hollow. You feel intact. Later that evening, you notice something subtle but new. You're not replaying the interaction in your head. You're not wondering what you should have said differently. You trusted yourself in the moment, and you followed through. That trust settles your nervous system in a way no amount of people-pleasing ever did. This is what all the earlier work was for. You paused instead of reacting. You used one clear sentence. You didn't defend. You didn't fix their feelings. You respected your capacity. And when the discomfort showed up, you stayed present instead of scrambling to escape it. The outcome isn't dramatic, but it's real. You kept your evening. You slept better. The relationship didn't collapse. And most importantly, you didn't abandon yourself to keep the peace. That's what boundaries actually give you in real life. Not control over others, but stability inside yourself. This is the payoff that often gets missed. Boundaries don't eliminate tension. They change your relationship to it. They keep tension from owning you. And once you experience that even once, it's hard to unsee the difference between reacting to make discomfort disappear and responding in a way that lets you live with yourself afterward. That Friday night used to end with exhaustion and quiet resentment. This one ends with clarity and rest. And that's not because anyone else changed. It's because you did. Section 10. What this episode was really about was learning how to stop using "it's fine" as a shortcut around your own truth. Not by becoming harsh, not by turning every interaction into a confrontation, and not by keeping a running score of what you've tolerated. It was about responding instead of reacting, so you don't trade your time, energy, and self-respect for a few seconds of temporary peace. When you can stay clear under pressure, your relationships get more honest, your mind gets quieter, and you stop carrying the hidden weight of things you never meant to agree to. At the beginning, you stepped into that late-night moment where a message lands wrong and your body knows it, but your mouth still tries to smooth it over. First, we named the real cost of minimizing yourself, the resentment that builds, the sleep you lose, the focus you can't hold, and the way you slowly teach yourself that your feelings don't matter. Next, you learned the pause that interrupts autopilot, so you stop answering from pressure and start answering from capacity. Then you practiced clarity without the long speeches, using a single clean sentence that doesn't invite a debate or require you to justify your existence. After that, you trained the skill most people skip, staying present when someone reacts, letting the awkwardness hang in the air without scrambling to fix it. Then we tackled the trap of defending your boundary like you're in court, and you saw how repeating a calm answer often protects you better than any explanation ever will. After that, you separated empathy from responsibility, caring about someone's feelings without taking their emotions on as your job. Next, you built consistency over time, because a boundary is not just something you say once, it's something you honor even when guilt shows up later. Finally, you protected your bandwidth, recognizing that boundaries often fail when you're depleted and everything hits at once. And that's why the Friday night story mattered. It wasn't a perfect conversation. It was a real moment where fatigue and pressure could have pulled you into the old pattern, and you watched yourself choose a different move. You paused, you checked your capacity, you used one clear sentence, and you let discomfort exist without trying to buy your way out of it. The outcome was simple but powerful. You kept your evening, you slept better, you didn't spiral, and you didn't abandon yourself to keep the peace. That's what progress looks like in real life. Not drama. Not speeches. Just steadier choices that you can live with afterward. Now lock it in with 3 things you can do today. Today, pick one request or message that usually triggers an instant yes, and use the pause on purpose. Send or say, "I'm not sure yet, let me think about it and I'll get back to you," then wait at least 10 minutes before deciding. Today, choose one place you over-explain and practice a one-sentence boundary instead. Say, "That doesn't work for me," and if you feel the urge to add a paragraph, stop and repeat the sentence once more without new reasons. Today, do one quick bandwidth check before you respond to anything emotionally loaded, and protect your capacity if you're already full. Use, "I don't have the bandwidth for this right now, but I can follow up tomorrow," and then let that be enough without rescuing the other person's reaction. If this connected with you, the next lesson to watch is about staying emotionally detached without becoming distant, with a focus on how to stop overfunctioning for other adults while still showing up with warmth. A good title for it would be, "How to Care Without Carrying Everything." If you want a whole library of Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships, this is what we do here every week. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.